our spring webinar for North Star. We'd like to introduce Andy, who is going to present on cyber continuity for us. So without further ado, take it away, Andy.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Glad you were here. We'll go ahead and dive right into the content. So the webinar that you signed up for is a very fancy term, the cyber continuity in the hybrid workplace. Now, what exactly does that mean, and why are we, spotlighting this as a topic? Well, think back a couple years ago, right, when all of a sudden everybody in an emergency at the start of COVID had to start figuring out how to get everybody to work from home. A lot of different companies sort of implemented an emergency virtual or hybrid model. And hopefully, hoping it would only be a couple weeks or a couple months. And here we are 2 years later. So we see in the news all the time about companies who have now decided to make this their permanent policy, a permanent work from home or hybrid policy. And I work with a lot of clients on their policies and procedures, especially in cybersecurity and cyber continuity. One of the things we realized is at the time, because it was an emergency implementation of a virtual workplace and virtual office, they didn't necessarily take into account how this could affect their already stated policies and procedures. And we'll go through a couple examples as we walk through the presentation. So the idea now is, okay, well, now that we're a couple years down the road and this appears to be, a pretty, pretty stable and permanent situation, how should our policies and procedures in various businesses take into account? How do they need to evolve in order to account for the hybrid workplace? So one of the things that we said, not only do the emerging and virtual workspaces, it still doesn't change the fact that the biggest threat to cybersecurity is human behavior. So that didn't change. What did change is the shifting landscape now with new attack vectors and increasing importance of not only training, but cyber hygiene and use of the new tools that our employees and workplaces have to utilize in order to counteract the apathy, maybe some resentment, maybe some issues, and lack of experience in less tech savvy workers is a concern as well. So with an increased reliance on these new digital tools, so too increases a complexity and pressure on this new normal workplace. So the themes that we're going to cover today are really going to focus on first, acknowledging the new reality. So this is sort of your acceptance statement. Let's accept that we're in a new reality and new type of workplace and that we're going to need to adapt. The second theme is going to be about balancing risk. Now, listen, we could put a tech support person in every employee's home, but that's going to be prohibitively costly. So we need to do something, but not overreact. We need to have a reaction and make some changes, but not necessarily overreact. So how we can do that is to measure the risk, right? The additional risk that this poses to our organizations, and then provide appropriate mitigation in order to counteract those new and evolving risks. We'll also talk about providing options. So just different ideas on different solutions that I've had clients implement that a lot in my industry are talking about. And then providing support, which is probably, that's out of all the solutions that we talk about, both technology and otherwise, one common theme you're going to see throughout this presentation is about providing additional support and new types of support to our employee bases to make sure that we're really accounting for different types of learning styles, different levels of comfortability with these new and different technologies. Before I go on too much further, I did just want to cover one housekeeping item. If you have questions, you can go ahead and drop a question into the Q&A portion at the bottom of your screen, little Q&A tag, right down here. You can go ahead and put your questions in there. We can answer your questions throughout the presentation, but we'll also come back and answer all your questions at the end as well. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for some discussion. So the first main thing, we're going to walk away in this presentation with, I'll give you a little preview, 4 different action items. So if you're taking notes, these are the 4 things I'm going to want you to write down. We'll start with number 1. And you're also going to be provided with access to cybersecurity and acceptable use policy templates that you can just use as a guideline or as a guide within your organization. So the first action item is acknowledgement. So this is that acceptance piece that we talked about. So we need to acknowledge that there are new challenges in addition to the new opportunities. So we're not here today to talk about or debate on the merits and all of the pros and cons that come with hybrid working and operations and work-life balance. Those are certainly opportunities that are out there as well as challenges. We're really here focused mostly on the cybersecurity portions and how it actually could impact the overall operation of the organization. So the reality is, and one of those other things that we need to acknowledge is that as much as we would want to trust everybody that they're going to do the right thing, the reality is, and we need to acknowledge, some employees may try and take shortcuts with their work tasks with this new hybrid environment. And since in a hybrid and virtual workplace, most of those tasks are going to rely on technology, it's not a far leap to believe that some of those shortcuts may involve cyber shortcuts. So is the answer stricter policies and more monitoring? Maybe, but maybe, there could also be some incentives for, positive behaviors and reinforcing positive behavior. So is it a carrot versus a stick? Which one should really be considered? And so we'll talk about when considering changes to your policies, to your cybersecurity or acceptable use, your employee policies, how to account for that. And instead of just becoming more strict, more about how to adapt and evolve them in order to be more appropriate for that particular new workplace. But before we get into that too much more, let's consider a few of the pros and cons from an operational perspective and an operational continuity perspective. So the first hybrid, the pros, so this is reliance on home utilities and technology. So when you're working from home or working virtually, you're worried about you're relying on your own power, your own internet, are really the 2 main things from a utility point of view, and also some of your own individual technologies, personally owned technologies, maybe a keyboard, mouse, microphone, camera, whatever the case may be. So one of the positives is that this distributes the risks across a geographical area as opposed to a single building or location. So, think back on, again, back in the day when we may have, when you were in an office building, if the entire building lost power, well, everybody all of a sudden has no power, no power electricity. Well, to mitigate that risk, you may have had a site generator, uninterrupted power supply in order to make sure that your employees have the power needs that they need. Well, not necessarily. So that reduces the risk in that a single power outage is unlikely to affect your entire employee base unless you're a very local, employee base. Everybody's in the same city or town, and all of a sudden you have a massive power failure, like what took place in Texas back in February. That could impact all of your employees, but you would have probably had the same situation. You probably may have had the same situation even if you were in, all in a single location or all in a single building. So the con here is that smaller localized disruptions are going to be more common, which means you may not have as many massive disruptions of many employees, all of a sudden being unable to work, but you may have many more frequent small cases of one or a few employees unable to work because of local utility disruptions. So one of the solutions to overcome that, and again, this is about balancing the risk, is instead, what we could do is give every employee a backup generator, right, in their home. Spend $5,000 per employee, put a standby generator and a satellite, sign them up for Elon Musk's Starlink. But that might be an overcorrection depending on the type of company that you have. So what I would recommend, and it's a solid recommendation at this point, is to identify the critical people. So your critical resources. So these might be a few senior leaders, your IT folks, maybe if you have somebody head of securities, head of facilities or security, and actually do go ahead and provide them with a backup power source. Have the company fund a backup or standby generator in their home in order to make sure that they have backup power assets available. Now, as far as internet, which is the other utility that's most heavily relied on with virtual operations, anybody with a cell phone can go ahead and turn on their hotspot and usually utilize that. So that might be incorporated into your policies and procedures as well, that in the case of an internet power loss, we would expect or ask our employees if they have, unlimited data on their phones to go ahead and try and connect in via hotspot until their home ISP is restored. Now, again, for critical people, this may involve maybe getting them a hotspot, where they could connect into, in the case of a power loss. If you lose power, but still have, cell phone capability, that could get you through and be able to manage through many different types of disruptions. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize when having internet, having a power loss, is that usually it's not the internet itself that goes down or access to the internet. It's the access point to the internet, which would be the router in the home, the Wi-Fi router that would allow you to have connection. So what I advise is to, if you have a backup generator, not only plan on powering your equipment, but go ahead and power your router as well. Chances are good that even if you don't have power to the house, you would still have internet access. You just need a way to access it via the router. So what I have in my house is, I don't have a standby generator, but we do have a portable generator. And if we lose power, the first two things that get plugged in, if I have to work, are going to be the computer to make sure that it's being charged up. Now, the laptop, I have a standby battery, so it's going to last for an hour and a half before it dies. But the other thing that I'm going to plug in is the router. And usually with that, we're going to be able to stay up and running at least until, at least be able to take care of the most critical operations and critical things that we need to, until I can get on the phone with the power company and find out what's going on and move through there. So that's pro and con number one. We only have 3 of them. So the next one we'll move on to is going to be self-management. So this is moving a bit more into your typical sort of, debate and discussions on hybrid work and remote work. So some pros and cons and a possible solution. So pros are that you have distribute the risks. Wait, hold on. I'm still on the same one. Actually, I don't think this, did this slide get duplicated? I may have had a duplication on this slide. Hold on. Let me look to see. Yeah, okay, here we go. Self-management. Sorry about that. Everybody should see it now. Okay, so the pro is that employees are empowered to work on their own time and at their own pace as long as they meet their goals. So for many employees, that's great, except in the case when they may not be very self-motivated or able to, manage their time appropriately. There's still a temptation to go ahead and take that 2-hour afternoon nap or work from the beach, for example. It's great to have that benefit where you can work from the beach, but there can be a lot of distractions as opposed to an office environment. And the reality is, again, this comes back to the acceptance part, is that some employees might exploit that freedom. So what do we do about it? Well, I think employers and leaders really need to ask yourself, is this a big deal with some functions? With every piece of the operation, if people aren't getting their work done, does it really matter if they're not working at 6 or 7 or 8 o'clock at night? So for non-critical functions that don't involve interacting with multiple people, that's probably not that big of a deal. It's probably something you can relax on. However, for critical functions or those, that really need to, for those that really need to require interaction and other teammates to be available, say working as a team or a project, you're really not going to be able to manage yourself anytime you want and just work anytime that you want. So that's really something to be considered, but again, so some additional accountability may be warranted. That can come in the form of, say more strict policies and procedures, which if you're going to have an additional policy or make something more restrictive, you also have to be prepared to monitor and enforce it. So how would you detect a violation of that policy? And then what are the consequences for a violation of that policy? Another con that can kind of come along the same line with is understand this is where those shortcuts may come in. Some employees with less supervision may be more likely to take shortcuts. Maybe they're going to be using their personal devices for phone calls because they don't want to have to carry, two things around. They may be using applications that they shouldn't be, that are less publicly, that are publicly available for critical and secure company documents. They might want to go and work at a Starbucks or a McDonald's and use the Wi-Fi there, or even the airport, non-public Wi-Fi, because they want to be able to take advantage of their new freedoms. So putting some guidelines around that and some enforcement for both from a technology point of view, as well as a policy and procedure point of view, is going to be something to consider. So just consider that there may be, attempts to, it could be in document sharing as well, texting employer, coworkers, critical information, as opposed to, utilizing the company communication tools that they're supposed to, an attempt to get around the red tape and bureaucracy that the virtual document, access can have. So part of this could also be education, educating and having them understand why working in a, working at a Starbucks could be a risk, understanding why they shouldn't be emailing information to their home just because they can print it, understanding why, and then also giving them the tools and make sure that they have the training and understanding of how to utilize the tools that you want them to in order to make sure to protect the company and ultimately protect their jobs. The company needs to be successful and protected in order for them to be successful and, frankly, to be able to continue to have a job just like they did before. So the third con we'll go ahead and look at is emergency response teams. So this may not be applicable to every organization, but many it will. If there's a large facility that needs to be maintained, or in the case of, in our experience with IT infrastructure. So even though everybody's working from home, there could still very well be, IT infrastructure on site, which needs to be maintained and monitored. So, if you have a server go offline or a key database online that you really need to have, hands-on in order to do anything with, well, the pro here is that you may have more ability off hours with exchange of flexibility to work from home. I think it's fair to ask for flexibility on availability during off hours or non-traditional hours in order to respond to company needs. So it can be an advantage for companies as well that all of their activity and productivity isn't necessarily just restricted to an 8 to 5 schedule anymore. But accessibility issues due to a disruption could hinder response and recovery. So give you an example of, if you used to have an IT team that would sit right next to the server room and something went wrong, they could go right in and no problem at all. If all of a sudden they lost access, or let's say that there was an IT failure and part of the impact is that all email communications go down in the company, well, they could still talk to each other. But what if that disruption also impacts their virtual communication tools? Let's say you use Zoom or Slack, for example, in order to perform all your company communications. So your emergency response teams, they coordinate their emergency response via Slack. What happens if part of the disruption is losing access to Slack? It could very well hinder and severely disrupt their ability to respond to that emergency. So what are some recommendations? Having an on-call policies for critical operators, also considering and employing an on-site remote hands resource to maintain readiness. So that could be, somebody, this is maybe going back to the days of an on-call cell phone, where you still have somebody in the office, maybe on an on-call or in-office rotation to basically make sure that you have somebody with boots on the ground, readiness at all times in the facility. And make sure that the leaders understand how to get in touch and communicate with that resource in order to take the emergency response actions that may be needed. So all that's summarized into that first action item number 2, which is going to be to implement, review, or update your acceptable use policies. And we'll go into a few more details on that in the next few slides. But the questions that you really need to ask yourself, first of all, and I mentioned this before, your policies may need to evolve with your company's approach to work. And then the question that you really want to ask is, looking at the acceptable use, are you telling your employees to violate your own policies? I'll give you an example. I was working with a client that made the decision to go fully remote maybe 6 months ago. So they've already been in this. We were looking at their acceptable use updates. Now, keep in mind, they had pretty much already moved all of their employees off of, physical meetings and workspaces, and were using Microsoft Teams in order to communicate. Well, their acceptable use policy specifically stated that they were not permitted to share any company documentation via video of any kind. Okay. So their policies, their new operations were clearly in violation of their old policies. So this would be an example of, what would need to be updated and why that needs to be, why that should be reviewed. So we'll talk about cybersecurity policies and acceptable use updates and what you may need to do. And these are really the two policies that we're going to focus on. And I think Jake shared or is going to share those template policies that you can take a look at. So first, a few key items. Resist the urge for convenience. So i.e., for example, one thing that new acceptable use policy, if you don't already have it, is do not send documents or email documents to yourself at home in order to print them. Now, that for some companies, that may be okay. It may be certain types of documents are allowed and other types are not. What you would have to consider as a leader would be first of all, how do we monitor that? How are we going to monitor the traffic coming in and out? And then two, okay, well, how do we provide instruction? How are employees supposed to go ahead and have something printed out? Maybe it has to happen. Maybe you deal with contracts, you're a legal office. All right, well, maybe you need to get printers and have, physical printers, distributed to key employees in their homes. But that needs to be covered and really, really think about what people may think is okay to do as far as to legitimately complete their work, provide them an acceptable tool that's in a secure way, and give them the education on how to utilize those tools as well. So the second bullet point is, yes, we know we said you can work from anywhere, but we didn't really mean anywhere. So that means, not working in public places, coffee shops. Using public Wi-Fi is a big, cybersecurity no-no. But also consider, if you're working in a particular area, people can walk behind you and see your screen and see what's going on. What if you have somebody that's working on, working on merger documentation or working on, accounting information? You probably don't want anybody who's walking by, maybe somebody who's sitting behind that person, to be able to glance over and see what they're working on. So consider that, and again, consider that in updating your acceptable use policies. Another one, and this is just my personal opinion, but if you want to go to the beach, just take the damn vacation day. Just take the day off. That's what vacation is for. You don't have to try and figure out how you can actually get your laptop onto the beach, and then I've seen people do this. Try and connect to their hotspot so they can be on the beach. So that way they can, not sacrifice the vacation time. Just take the vacation time. It's going to be a lot safer. You're going to have a lot less destroyed and lost equipment if that's the case. Plus, again, this kind of comes back to education. Just because you can work from home, one of those things you should do is to try and minimize disruptions. It's fine. And I understand, listen, I have 4 kids myself. It's great for me to be able to work from home so I can drive my kids around, but it doesn't mean I'm going to do a very effective job, if they're screaming and running around, behind me all the time. So taking the time, if I need to walk away and finish my task later, that's where that, that flexibility comes into. Maybe I just shouldn't work on this right now because I have other things that I need to pay attention to that are happening around me in my new hybrid work environment. So let me pay attention to them and then come back so I can focus on the work task later. multitasking is not the end all be all, that we think it is. I've read a few articles recently that talk about actually really how inefficient multitasking can be. And when I step back and look at it, I agree with that. If I'm trying to multitask all day, I just get frazzled and I do, probably not as high quality work if I were to dedicate time to one particular task at a time. The third bullet on here and consideration, is this statement. Yes, listen, we trust you, but / we need to hold you accountable. So that's one of the things, I talk with a lot of employees out there, a lot of colleagues, and that's what they don't hear. There's a lot of questions and issues around trust of, well, don't you trust me to work from home? And I've heard the answer. One of the best answers I had is, yeah, I trust you, but I need to hold you accountable. Well, I think we need to tweak that a little bit, right? It doesn't have to be a but statement. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So how about this? We trust you and we still need to hold you accountable. Doesn't that sound a little bit nicer? I think it does. So, a few ways that we can do this to demonstrate to employees that we trust them and we need to hold them accountable, having daily video check-ins, with management or the team. And then, making sure and let them know that, hey, listen, your web traffic is going to be monitored. And you can explain it to them that this is as much to protect you and the company as well as it is, we're not trying to, stop you or have an issue from, going and reading your local news or checking the sports scores. But browsing on the internet is a two-way interaction. So they're going to be able to see what you're doing. They're going to be able to see what you're doing on behalf of the company. This could open you up to, ransomware, could open you up to, all kinds of, viruses and not so good things that could potentially happen. So it's about protecting not only themselves, but protecting the companies as well. These are really things, that I think should be considered, and a few suggestions as far as, what we should do when it comes to acceptable use policies, and updates. And I think I had mentioned before, it's vital and critical for IT and HR, to work together to develop, monitor, and enforce protocols and procedures based on the monitoring tools that are available. So, what's the stick here, right? When we talk about the stick and the carrot, the stick is we're going to monitor what you're doing. And if you do something that you're not, there, you shouldn't be, there may be consequences. But then you may ask, well, what's the carrot? Well, the carrot is the fact that you can have enhanced life balance, work-life balance benefits of remote work. That if you want these additional benefits and this balance, that's fine, but we're also going to need you to work within the confines to make sure that the company is still protected. And I think if we present it in that way, then we'll have a lot more, hopefully start to try and address this issue of trust, or perception of lack of trust that a lot of employees can have because of enforcement protocols that are put on at work. So remember, I trust you and I still need to hold you accountable. So this is food for thought. So I don't have an answer for this question, but I do think it sort of gets the juices flowing. Is that, we talk a lot about, technology and working from home and different disruptions. If I were in a room, and this is great to when I'm actually doing this presentation in front of a group of people live. So see, working remote and doing webinars isn't always the best. But I'll ask, and this is actually a great conversation to have, is it time to consider incorporating home technology downtime into work absence policies? Let me give you an example. So maybe 1 out of 100 employees, I don't know, maybe it's 1 out of 1,000. I have no idea. They may just not be that motivated to get their work done. So they go log in the morning and then say, you know what, I'm just going to pretend that I can't get in, that I'm getting an error and I don't know what to do about it. And so I'm going to call IT and tell my boss and let him know, hey, I can't get connected. I don't know what you want me to do. I'm just going to wait here and see if it can fix itself, or I'm going to try and get connected. Meanwhile, they may be going off to the movies. Who knows? I have no idea. But there may be, again, we have to accept the reality that there may be some people who try and take advantage of this. And then, of course, there's always legitimate time, that people may have technology challenges that they may just not be able to get any work done. So is it right for us as employers to be paying them for that time, productive time, when they're not actually contributing to the company and helping out our customers? So the consideration is, one of the big benefits, and I was reading some statistics the other day that sick time among employers is actually down about 30% from what it used to be. If you factor out COVID and time off work and absence because of COVID, because in the past, if somebody was feeling sick, they were told, don't come in the office. We don't want you spreading it around. Or you may just really not feel like getting up, getting in the shower, getting in the car, packing your lunch, getting on a train, and then sitting in an office for 8 hours straight. Whereas if you're not feeling good today, that decision, anybody who was on the fence in the past, you may have decided to go ahead and stay home and call out sick. Now, if they were on the fence before, they might say, I really don't want to burn my sick time. And all I have to do is go downstairs and get on my laptop. I think I can muscle through. So time off work is actually down quite a bit. So one consideration to make is, should employees be given some technology downtime, and sort of work that into, just as we would have in the past, unanticipated sick time, where if you have a couple of days off, a quarter, a couple of days off a year, if you're not feeling sick and you can just call out sick, maybe we give employees the opportunity to call out, downtime. Say, well, I can't get connected today, and I really don't know what's going on. I may need the whole day. I think I'm just going to take today as a tech day or as a tech downtime day. Now, maybe that eats into their already existing, sick time, or maybe we add some additional time, or maybe it's a balance of the two. Maybe we, reduce the number of sick days by a day and then add 2 technology downtime days for them to deal with, home disruptions, reliance on, whether it's a power outage at their home or an ISP outage or whatever the case may be. So, like I said, don't have any answers here necessarily, but just food for thought about some of the dynamic ways in which the workplace and our policies and procedures may be evolving, and maybe this is something that's going to become a hot topic later on down the road. I'm not sure, but something to consider. All right, so the next topic is the aging, or the gray elephant in the room. So the elephant in the room that I want to talk about is, by going virtual and hybrid, are you opening yourself up to an accessibility issue, to an accessibility complaint? We're just going to lay it out there. So the non-tech savvy employees also tend to be older employees, not across the board, but we do have employees that struggle, and we find that employees are struggling if they tend to be less familiar with the technology, that we are asking them to use. So think about the types of technologies that are becoming dominant in the workplace. So Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Slack, none of these even existed 5 years ago. Most people didn't even know, what they were or who they were. So think about, if you're an employee and you've been in the workforce and you've been, working on different tools and different ways of working for the last 40 years, and all of a sudden you're being asked to adapt and move all of your work and operation to a technology that you've never used before or anything similar to it, well, you could certainly be causing some issues there. And just because you know how to reboot your router, or you took a typing class in school, doesn't mean everybody does or has. You may very well have employees that don't type very well, that never really learned how to type because they always did most of their work, working, face to face with people or writing things down. And what happens if you have that star employee, who all of a sudden isn't a very good typer? Now they all of a sudden went from your star employee to hardly performing at all, and very frustrated because they were basically set up for failure, or not, at the very least, not being set up for success. So the question you should ask is, are you properly supporting them, or are you just expecting everyone to have the same knowledge as a junior member of the Geek Squad? So did you just give everybody the same, hey, watch these couple of YouTube videos and that should teach you everything you need to know about how to use Teams or how to use Slack? Not everybody learns the same way, and some people are not as adaptive as others. So while that may have been okay in the new COVID era 2 years ago, when sort of everybody was in the same boat and we all had to adapt to these technologies, it's time to take a step back and say, did we leave some behind? And especially, we need to take a look at, you want to make sure that you're not going to open yourself up to claims of ageism in your workplace because you're not giving proper support to less tech savvy employees that may need some additional help. So what are we going to do about it? And what do I mean? What should you do? So consider it and ask yourself, are we really supporting everybody the way that we need to? Whether the answer is yes or no, I think you should consider at least a few different options. So first, what do you do about it? Providing this additional support for employees that may struggle or may be less tech savvy. So first is do it yourself. Again, a common theme is that acknowledgement piece. So acknowledge and accept that some employees will need some more time to adapt. You may want to consider, high-speed internet connection or a new ISP altogether. What if I don't even think dial-up even exists out there anymore. But what if they don't have the right level of technology available at their house? What if they don't have a high-speed connection? Is it your responsibility as an employer? Do you need to insist that all your employees pay for it themselves? Do you provide them with a stipend in order to have their in order to upgrade their ISP speed or upgrade their router? Or do you purchase the equipment for them and just pay for it out of yourself? So if you haven't already dealt with this, you may have already dealt with it, but if not, maybe take a step back. If you're having some productivity issues with some of your remote workers, these may be some of the reasons, and you may want to look into it and consider some supportive options. So another consideration is to find and provide some basic IT management resources. So yes, actually, I know I joked about it saying, hey, did you watch these 2 YouTube videos? But there's a lot of great information on YouTube. Your company, who is a cleaning service, may not be experts on how to set up a high-speed internet connection, but you know who is? Donkey Kong 393 on YouTube does an excellent job at explaining how to do that. So maybe find that information and provide it to your employees, as additional resources, or, have a resource library within your network, with links to either, home-based, either homegrown information resources that you put together. But again, if that's not your your area of expertise, it's okay to use resources that are out there and available. YouTube is an excellent resource, or I'll use Teams as an example, or YouTube. There's been a number of technologies that I've built recently, that I've started using recently. I'll give you an example. ActiveCampaign. There's a great example. They have an excellent onboarding resource. They have help videos all over the place to help you get on board and how to use the technology. So why not utilize those? Consider what these technologies already have. Instead of you having to train somebody how to use Teams, actually use the resources that Teams provide as far as how to use it. We'll go ahead and I'm going to pick things up a little bit just because I realize I'm running a little bit behind on time. So option number 2, outsource, bring somebody in. Like I said, if you're a cleaning company and a lot of people are working from home now, you may not be the experts. What about just bringing in an expert? So considering outsourcing to a managed service provider to help with both home access as well as company issues, as well as company-wide issues, but expand what level of support they have to say, we may also need you to help someone having trouble with their home IT. And consider, do you go with somebody local who can physically visit those homes and diagnose those issues, AKA an agreement with like a Geek Squad or other similar remote, or other similar service, or do you do it fully remote? There are a lot of options. Another one is Basque.com. It's a lot cheaper if the issue is local. The problem is, they're cheaper, but they're all virtual. So they got the connection has to be up, and they got to be able to get into your computer in order to be able to do anything. So they're not going to do much good if this is an ISP or router issue or computer failure. But they can help out with a lot of stuff if they're getting errors or can't get to websites or whatever the case may be. Really great option looking at managed service providers, but it's also probably your most costly option. The third option is going to be to enhance or expand your existing IT support team. If you have an IT support team, an internal team, I would consider expanding their charter to not just support internal company issues or problems just with company property, but also expand that to challenges that employees may have accessing the company network and accessing company tools and assets. So this is going to complicate their job, and it probably require some additional investment, plus some additional training. You may need to hire a couple people that were formerly formerly Geek Squad members. But consider expanding that IT team in order to help with various issues beyond just I'm having a problem with my work computer. It could be how they get to it as well. I've had this experience myself where I couldn't get connected. I called my company IT and they said, well, it's not a problem with your computer. We can't help you. You have to call your ISP and deal with it there. Well, it would have been nice. It would have been nice if I got a little bit more help than that. Like, well, tell us, what router do you have? Have you tried rebooting it? Let's go ahead and walk you through. Who do you have? Comcast? Here, let's get them on the line and I can talk, nerd to nerd with their Comcast guys in order to try and figure out what your problem is. And one thing I want to point out here is to closely monitor your employee performance and really consider, whether, and ask them and have a frank, open conversation with them. If you see somebody who's struggling, ask them and consider, could this be a technology? Could this be not just a performance issue, but a lack of familiarity or struggling to use these new technologies that you're asking these employees to use? There could be some embarrassment. They might be embarrassed about saying that, well, I just can't type very fast. I never learned how to type. Or I really don't know I don't even know how my computer connects to the internet. It just does when I turn it on. So I don't understand how to do even basic troubleshooting. There could be an embarrassment there, especially if they're surrounded by people who seem to be a lot more day-to-day tech savvy than they are. So have some empathy, treat that carefully. Is it going to take a time and investment of money to do this? Yes, but it may be the best choice for your employees. So that's action item number 3. Provide all your employees with the resources they need and empathize with those who struggle. So the last thing we're going to walk through and the last action item is going to be around communication channels. So consider this scenario. So pre-COVID, you have a contact center where everybody's computer systems go down. What would happen, and this is what happened in my experience back in the day at MBNA, if anybody remembers that company, supervisors would they could stand up and just yell out to everybody, hey, everybody, computers are down. Tell customers we're down right now and to call back in 20 minutes. We did that all the time. Worked great. We're able to communicate it. However, consider the impact now if you have a virtual call center. So everybody's at home and all of a sudden, all of your employees, that are answering phone calls, their systems go dead. What happens? Who are they going to call? They have no idea what to do unless you have, pre-built call trees or something like that. What if whatever this failure is also impacting internal communication systems? What is your primary communication system? Is it email? Is it Teams? Is it Slack? What if that goes down as well? So it really increases the complexity because you don't have that, pre-COVID when everybody was all in the same building. When it comes to a communications failure, you always had as a backup, as a worst case scenario, you go to that person's desk and you talk to them. Well, in a hybrid work environment, we may not have that option unless you're going to be driving around to each employee's house and knocking on their door. So we're going to have to evolve and adapt. Now, what does that mean? So there are a few things that we can actually do about it. So consider that individual employees may be left stranded with no idea who to call or what to do if there's a single point of failure somewhere between their computer and accessing their work tools. So what should you do about it? One, I consider a SaaS emergency communication service. So things like EventBridge, Alert Media, or we actually have a product called the Tempest Gateway, which can provide an easy and automated two-way channel that is completely unreliant on your internal company network. It's a there's standalone separate services that you can use for emergency communications. For smaller organizations, it could be feasible to just have a text group. In fact, most of the clients that I have, they're usually small enough. I work with small and mid-sized businesses. It's anywhere less than, maybe 30 employees. It's feasible to have a text group with everybody on it and make sure that it's kept up to date. The problem is keeping it up to date. So if somebody's phone number changes, then they got to make sure that everybody else on the text group knows, and it can be a big pain in order to maintain. So, that's where the larger you get, the more critical it becomes to consider a separate communication service. Another opportunity could be an extranet solution like Google Drive, or again, the Tempest Gateway, where troubleshooting, contact information, and policies and procedures can be housed. So you could put an emergency contact sheet out there on Google Drive and make sure all your employees have the link to it, or if you have an extranet service, or maybe on your website, you have an employee access only portion, right? Where they have to log in, but at least there's messaging there to let them know, what they should do or what to do in case of a situation. So back in the day, if computer systems were to go down, that manager stands up and says, "Hey, tell everybody we're down. We apologize and try back, try calling us back in an hour." You could send that out as a blast text message or email to everybody's personal email in an emergency, or a pop-up notification on their phones. "Hey, we know the computer systems are down. Tell all the customers to try back in an hour and we're working on it." There's a lot of different considerations there. So this is your action item number 4. Develop easy to access redundant communication solutions for employees experiencing technology challenges. Make sure that they have the resources and know how to access those resources, even to the point of, well, here's an 800 number to get to IT if you have an issue. Or here's your manager's personal cell phone. You call them if you absolutely have an issue, and all of the services are, all the company services and company communication channels are down that we rely on day to day. At least you have a backup, and that way you're not relying on really old school call trees like we used to rely on when there were snow days, back before snow days no longer existed and all the kids could just work from home. So to wrap up, action item review. First action item, acknowledge new challenges in addition to the opportunities, lots of opportunities that hybrid remote work provides businesses and employees. There are new opportunities. It's great for employees. It also opens up some additional risks beyond the traditional, the tired rote of, oh, less productivity, I don't have as much collaboration. That's a totally different webinar. It does pose some cybersecurity challenges that need to be acknowledged and addressed. Number 2, implement, review, and update your acceptable use and cybersecurity policies. Really, any policies that are relevant. It's always a good idea to look through all of them and update them at least. All of your policies and procedures, you should be updating them at least once a year. But definitely go through at least your IT-related acceptable use and cybersecurity policies, and consider the impacts to any hybrid or virtual working arrangements. Number 3, make sure employees have the resources they need and empathize with those who are struggling. Listen to them, try and help them. And this may be providing support that traditionally you haven't had to worry about support. You're now in their homes. Treat them accordingly. And then finally, develop easy access to redundant communication solutions for employees experiencing technology challenges. So that's pretty much the majority of what I wanted to go through. If you want to learn more or hear more about other operational resilience solutions, my company, Tempest Risk Management, we provide business playbook consultation. So that's writing, reviewing policies and procedures. We're certified business continuity planning specialists as well. And the Tempest Gateway is a good, actually designed to be a virtual mobile company operations platform. A lot of good capabilities there. So feel free to go to my website, go to tempestrisk.com, check it out, or let me know if you have any questions. In the meantime, as far as me, thank you for your time. We can go ahead and answer questions that are coming up here. We'll dive into that. But before we get to all the questions, I'll say best way to get in touch with me. Here's my email. I'll leave it up here. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, so you can message me there. All kinds of stuff like that. So I had a question here. I had to jump. Do you do trainings for regional SBDCs? Absolutely. Give me a call. I am happy to do this presentation. And there's a couple other webinars that we do for business organizations. So chambers of commerce, small business development centers. We work extensively with the Delaware Small Business Development Center. I'm doing a basic business continuity presentation to a group of 13 small business development centers in Texas in a couple of months. So I'm always happy to do that. honestly helps me to build my brand a little bit and get my name out there. But the point is, and what we're in here for, why we started this business was to help small businesses. Our goals align directly with the Small Business Development Center. So if you're interested in this, or maybe some of the other topics that we can present on for your clients or members of the regional SBDCs, absolutely reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to do that. We work with SBDCs quite a bit. There was another question on here. How do you facilitate technology downtime with a technology-based business? So I would, if the calls were open, I would say, can you elaborate on what that question is? So I think how I'm going to interpret that is, how would you facilitate technology downtime with a tech-based business? Okay, so how would we deal with if our entire company is 100% virtual? How would we facilitate, or what do we do if we have downtime, if somebody is down? I think it depends on the scenario, but I can speak from experience. Tempest Risk Management, we have 8 employees and we are 100% virtual. I have people all over the country. In fact, the only employee that's even close to here is my daughter. So she's easy to talk to. I can just go upstairs and say, hey, computer systems are down. But I think it really depends. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before, which is the communication channels. So the biggest thing is you can work it out together. Technology challenges and technology downtime and issues aren't new. What is new is, I think, a lack of ability to work with those employees and communicate with them, because we can't just stop by the desk anymore. So I think if you're a small enough organization, less than 10 people, having a text group, a text chat in which you can, text everybody back and forth, and develop policies and procedures, a policy that says, if you can't get in, if you can't access a tool, you're getting an error message, notify your manager, call them on their cell phone, or go to your IT person. Or if it's a very small company, text everybody. Hey guys, I can't get into Teams today. Email me at wherever if you need me, working on it, or whatever the case may be. So communication is still going to be key, just like it always has. But if you're a fully virtual company, the communication actually isn't as easy if that single point of failure of the interface between you and the computer screen, that's what's going to be. And there's a lot of points of failure that exist now, which didn't exist before. And you really don't have that hold standby of, I can just go to the person's desk and talk to them. So what are you going to do? Plan accordingly. Look at either an extra, an outsourced tool. Like I said, Everbridge is a really good one. The Tempest Gateway has the capability to do that. Or even just calling people. In regards to, so that communication is number one. Now, how do you do your business? So that's where a business continuity plan would come into play. So a business continuity plan is a pre-planned set of steps in order to what you would do if critical components of the organization and critical operations are not able to function. It's governed by an international standard, ISO 22301. That there are a lot of there are organizations out there that can help you. There's a lot of information online. Actually, I point a lot of customers to the SBA. I think it's SB. I can't remember the URL right now. Maybe it's Protect My Business. I'm sorry, I can't remember. But the Small Business Association actually has a whole section on business continuity planning. And we've actually started adapting for a lot of clients, adapting their business continuity plans to a virtual environment. So what that usually does, how that would involve is you really have to look at each critical component of the organization and develop backup procedures. So if Slack goes down, can we use Teams or email? Have something that everybody knows and pre-documented. If this thing fails, then we're going to do this as a backup. Or can we do it manually? Should we start writing down notes? If you're taking orders, let's say you run a company and you have employees, you're a retail organization, right? You have employees that are taking orders from clients all day long. What happens if they lose, connection to the system in which you do that? Well, develop an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or whatever the case may be to say, if this system is not available, manually document it or fall back onto this manual process until systems are restored. And that's nothing new. It just, that's all basic business continuity planning. It just needs to evolve a bit in order to, and make sure that if you had business continuity plans before, that they've evolved with the new hybrid office that you may be operating in. So I think those were those two. Hopefully, Sammy Peebles, that was the question you were asking for. If not, email me or send me a message on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to talk about it more. I don't see any other open questions. Sammy said, yes, thank you. Great. Glad that I could help. I don't see any other open questions out there. We still have a couple minutes left. Jake, I don't know if you want to comment on anything that you heard. And by the way, I think I mentioned this is the first time that we're actually doing, we put this together working. Jake and I worked very closely together to put this information together. This is our first time developing it. So if you have feedback, please send it to me. I'm very open to feedback about how we can make this better, because we do want to roll this out to other organizations and help companies, small businesses especially, make that transition from a brick and mortar to a hybrid organization and protect their operations. So very open to feedback. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it back to Jake, because I think he also has a survey that he wanted to talk about.